Hello, everybody. This video is a discussion I had with a member of the community about jhana. It's rather long, but jhana is a pretty complicated subject, so I think at least listening to most of it is a good idea. If you'd like to join the community, the link is in the description. Enjoy the video.
This will get a little bit dense, but honestly, I would say 80% of it you don't have to memorize, or maybe even more than 90% you don't have to memorize. Just be aware of it, and you can always check back. Anyway, okay, so here the Buddha is staying at the Eastern Monastery, and a man named Ganaka Moggallana goes to him and asks a question. Okay, so he says, in this place of Megara's mother is seen a step-by-step training, a step-by-step activity, a step-by-step practice, down to the last tread of the staircase. Even among these Brahmins is seen a step-by-step training, a step-by-step activity, a step-by-step practice in recitation. Even among these archers is seen a step-by-step training, okay, so on, so on. He expounds. So then his question is this. Now, Master Gautama, can a step-by-step training, a step-by-step activity, a step-by-step practice likewise be described in this Dhamma and Vinaya? And then the Buddha answers, Brahmin, a step-by-step training, step-by-step activity, step-by-step practice can likewise be described in this Dhamma and Vinaya. Just as when a dexterous horse tamer, on getting a fine thoroughbred colt, first makes it perform the task of wearing the bit, and then trains it further, in the same way, when the Tathagata gets a person fit to be tamed, he trains him thus. Come, monk, be virtuous, dwell restrained in accordance with the Patimokkha, consummate in your behavior and sphere of activity. Train yourself having undertaken the training rules, seeing danger in the slightest faults. Okay. So the Buddha is basically saying that, okay, the question is there a step-by-step training in your teachings? He says, yes, this isn't the only step-by-step training, but, the Buddha in fact, this is probably the most involved step-by-step training. That's why the Buddha probably gave this answer, because the Brahmin probably wanted a really, really satisfying answer. So this is the most satisfying step-by-step training the Buddha has. And so I'm going to emphasize the fact that this is a step-by-step training. Each thing the Buddha says, each stage, each step is itself a training. It's not just something that happens magically, right? It's something that requires effort. And you'll see in the sutta, there's no point where the Buddha then says, okay, now the training is done, and you just wait for this to happen. Every step, he's going to continue, going, next step, next step, next step. Okay, so the first step is to train your morality, basically, according to the rules. So he's giving the training for monks, so lay people don't have to follow these rules. But be virtuous. This is the real first stage, right? The Patimokkha has rules that aren't necessarily about virtue, but about cohesion with the monk community and the lay community at large. But regardless, if a monk follows the Patimokkha, he will definitely be practicing his virtuosity. So as lay people, this is the training. We should train ourselves to be virtuous. That's the first step, okay? Then the Buddha continues. When the monk is virtuous, seeing danger in the slightest faults, the Tathagata then trains him further. Come, monk, be one who is guarded in the doors of your sense faculties. On seeing a form with the eye, don't grasp at any theme or detail by which, if you were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the eye, evil, unskillful qualities, such as greed, distress, might assail you. Practice first restraint. Protect the faculty of the eye. Attain restraint with regard to the faculty of the eye. On hearing a sound of the ear, same. So basically he's saying to, okay, so I'll continue. On cognizing the idea of intellect, don't grasp at any theme or details by which, if you were to dwell without restraint over the faculty of the intellect, evil, unskillful qualities, such as greed, distress, might assail you. Okay. So he's basically saying that as far as your five senses and then your mental sense, those six senses, restrain yourself from anything that will produce evil qualities, right? Evil, unskillful, he's talking about greed, distress. There's more, obviously, like anger, ill will. So first step is to train your virtuosity, right? Second step is to practice not allowing your senses to lead you into unwholesome mental states. That's the second step of the training. Then he says, when When the monk is one who is guarded in the doors of his sense faculties. So this basically means like a monk, when he sees a beautiful woman, for example, doesn't like ogle her, right? He'll realize immediately, oh, I'm like, entering some lustful states. I'm gonna look away instead of ogling, right? Or, right, like tasting a flavor. So he gets some really good food. He doesn't start like obsessing over the food, right? For example, on hearing a sound, so here's some music. So a monk wouldn't hear like really beautiful music and start like, you know, obsessing over it, trying to like, listen to more and everything. All right, he's focused on being restrained. Okay, and also I want to stop right here. It's not to say that you have to live your entire life like this, but if you're going to go undergo this training, this is what you do. So for a monk, this is their life. But for a layperson, this training you can do at like a retreat center or a monastery or something, right? So it's not that you have to live your whole life like this, but while you're training, you practice these things. So that's why I tell people that if they want to practice jhana properly as a layperson, a retreat, at least to get started initially, is very valuable. Like at least a week, but I would say 2 weeks, a month, even multiple months,
Oh.
if possible. Obviously, depends on your schedule. So, okay. So, first step, train your virtuosity. Second step is train yourself to avoid um, allowing your senses to lead you into unwholesome mental states. Sense restraint is basically what it is. Okay, next one. When the monk is one who is guarded in the doors of the sense faculties, the Tathagata then trains him further. Come, monk, be one who is moderate in eating. One sec. Sorry. Okay, considering it appropriately, take your food not playfully, not for intoxication, nor for putting on bulk, nor for beautification, but simply for the survival and continuance of this body, for ending its afflictions. Okay, you get the point. So, next stage of the training is to basically get your eating in order, away from indulgence and towards, simply sustaining the body in a wholesome way.
Mhm.
Okay. When the monk is one who is moderate in eating, the Tathagata then trains him further. Come, monk, be one who is devoted to wakefulness. During the day, sitting and pacing back and forth, cleanse your mind of any qualities that would hold the mind in check. During the first watch of the night, dusk to 10 p.m., sitting and pacing back and forth, cleanse your mind of any qualities. Okay, so you can read it yourself, but basically the idea is after your food is, taken care of, your sleep, your alertness should get taken care of, your wakefulness. Again, not that you have to live your whole life like this, but again, when you've decided to undergo this training, this is what you would do, right? Again, at a retreat center or a monastery, whatever. So when the monk is one who is devoted to wakefulness, the Tathagata then trains him further. Come, monk, be one who is possessed of mindfulness and alertness. When going forward and returning, make yourself alert. When looking forward or looking away, when bending and extending your limbs, etc., etc. Again, you can read this yourself, but basically he's saying, yeah, so here, when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and remaining silent, make yourself alert. This is very much more, okay, this is, yeah, much more, how to say it, like accessible at a retreat center or something, because, there you're really focused on, the practice. But even as, outside the retreat center, basically just always trying to be mindful of whatever you're doing. One trick that I like to do, I mean, when I was at the monastery for 3 months, I did this. I would set an alarm that would ring every 10 minutes during my chore period.
Mhm.
And so every time the alarm went off, there'd be a reminder for me to try to be mindful. So I would attempt to be mindful for the entire, like, 2, 3 hour chore period, for example.
Mhm.
So, okay. So when the monk is one who's possessed of mindfulness and alertness, the Tathagata trains him further. And again, notice, he keeps saying, trains him further, trains him further. There's no point where he's stopping and saying, oh, by the way, now this will just happen to you magically. It's still training. So, you know, um, you train yourself to become alert. You train yourself to stay mindful throughout the day, right? And the next, so he says, come monk, seek out a secluded dwelling, a wilderness, a shade of a tree, a mountain, a glen, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, a forest grove, the open air, a heap of straw. So I guess it's maybe, well, for some people it might be kind of difficult to do this right away, right? So it's still considered training. Like get yourself comfortable living in these like secluded places. Retreat center also I think is valid.
Mhm.
Um, but definitely even at the retreat center, you might want to find a quiet corner of the retreat center to do your work, do your training.
Right.
Okay, so so all of this previously is basically preparation.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're getting your physical and mental condition into a very, you know, effective place for further training, further practice. Right. So yeah, so you started by training your virtuosity, which,
Mm-hmm.
you know, clears your mind of any like guilt, right? For example,
Mm-hmm.
other things too, of course. Sense restraint helps you not like helps your mind not dwell on things while you're meditating on, on pleasures or even pleasures are also like, anger or whatever, like anything like that. Just negativities. Yeah, so then we're talking about so this is related to like the mind being, in a good condition, and then the body also in a good condition, in terms of yeah, your eating, in terms of your like wakefulness,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of your mindfulness. So back to like strengthening the mind. So you created an atmosphere for your mind to always be mindful. Um, Back to a physical improvement in terms of well, both physical and mental is being in a secluded dwelling. So even though you've practiced sense restraint, there's an extra bolstering of that by not being exposed to anything that's like appealing or unappealing to the senses, right? Because you're somewhere secluded, like basically a neutral, quiet place where it's not going to disturb you physically or mentally. Okay, so finally, all this preparation, then he says this. After his meal, returning from his alms round, he sits down, crosses his legs, holds his body erect, and bring mindfulness to the fore. So now the proper meditation starts basically. And then he says, abandoning covetousness with regard to the world, he dwells with an awareness devoid of covetousness. He cleanses his mind of covetousness. Okay. Abandoning ill will and anger, he dwells with an awareness devoid of ill will, sympathetic to the welfare of all beings. This is kind of where metta meditation comes in. He cleanses the mind of ill will and anger. Abandoning sloth and drowsiness, he dwells with awareness devoid of sloth and drowsiness. Mindful, alert, percipient of light, he cleanses his mind of sloth and drowsiness. Abandoning restlessness and anxiety, he dwells undisturbed, his mind inwardly stilled. He cleanses his mind of restlessness and anxiety. Abandoning uncertainty, he dwells having crossed over uncertainty with no perplexity with regard to skillful qualities. He cleanses his mind of uncertainty. So this is called the five hindrances. A lot of teachers will take this and kind of run a little too far with them,
Mm-hmm.
make them into more than they are. This is like preparatory meditation to basically ensure that your mind isn't being like dogged by anything that's going to be a big obstacle moving forward. Um, you can read this yourself, of course, but yeah, all these five things will be quite a burden when you're
Mm-hmm.
continuing the meditation. So I would say like this is like I said, kind of a preparatory meditation. So when you finally done all the previous prep work in terms of like your physical and mental condition, now you're doing kind of preparatory meditation in that you're ensuring that, like I said, there's nothing that's going to be hindering you, right? The five hindrances, right? So that's I guess it's a nice checkup to do before you continue. And if anything's, if any of these five are bothering you, we definitely want to address it before moving forward. Okay. Having abandoned these five hindrances, imperfections of awareness that weaken discernment, then quite secluded from sensuality, secluded from unskillful qualities, he enters and remains in the first jhana. Okay, so first, back to what I was saying before. This is a training, right? Step by step. So everything previous has been a step-by-step training. Training means over time, not like just you do it right away. So this abandoning five hindrances, maybe you're lucky and have good karma and these things don't really bother you. Or maybe you don't have good karma and these things bother you greatly. So one person might take like an hour to abandon these five hindrances in their practice. Not, again, that's not a complete abandonment. And this is where a lot of teachers misunderstand. This is a step-by-step training, right? This is not like you have to live your whole life like this necessarily. This is a training. When you sit down to train, this is what you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So abandoning five hindrances does not mean they're gone forever. It just means in that moment, when you've done all this prep work, you found the secluded place, you sat down, brought mindfulness to the fore, da da da. Now, in this moment, you're able to abandon these five hindrances as part of the training, which again, for one person might take a few days or an hour, another person might take months or years to finally be able to do this. I'm sure you've met people, for example, who struggle seriously with anxiety, right? So they would take a long time to do this. Or people who, for example, struggle seriously with anger, right? They might take a long time to move past this step of training. Okay. And again, okay, so I'll read it again. Having abandoned these five hindrances, imperfections of awareness that weaken discernment, then quite secluded from sensuality, secluded from unskillful qualities, he enters and remains in the first jhana. You notice he doesn't stop here and say, now that you've done this five hindrances and all this preparatory work, now you just sit and wait for jhana to come to you, right? This is still part of a step-by-step training.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of teachers will be like, oh, you shouldn't want jhana because, jhana will just come, and if you want it, it won't come. This is like esoteric nonsense, honestly. I'm sorry, but it is. Jhana is a training. It's a practice, step by step.
Mm-hmm.
You do all this preparatory work, which could take a long time, right? This is not easy preparatory work to do, especially if your karma is not great. So you do all this preparatory work, and then finally you're fit to start practicing training in first jhana, right? Okay. And again, first jhana, I keep hammering this home because other teachers will really not understand this. First jhana, it's something you do on purpose. It's a training, right?
Mm-hmm.
Training isn't something that you just sit and wait and it happens to you naturally. It's something you do very consciously with, intention. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he enters and remains in the first jhana. And then he describes the first jhana. Rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. So I'll talk about this first. Okay. Rapture and pleasure, I'll look at the define. So this is a translational quirk. So when people read this rapture and pleasure, this is one of the reasons why so many teachers believe jhana to be this like very high mental state that just happens to you as if you don't want it, it'll just come because you did all this meditation for like hours and hours. Again, this is a translational quirk, but let's look up what rapture and pleasure means. Okay, I actually don't like. Should have prepared this to see. An expression, manifestation of ecstasy or passion. Okay. Pleasure. Okay. I actually don't like these definitions, but I'll continue. So to me, rapture, and I read this definition a while ago, so I don't know why I can't find it here. Feeling of intense pleasure or joy. Well, okay, here you go. Consider this, right? Feeling of intense pleasure or joy. Well, he already said pleasure here, right? So rapture, it wouldn't make sense. Pleasure and pleasure, right? So rapture. So let's look at the joy, right? Joy is a mental state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so pleasure, obviously we know satisfaction or enjoyment. Pleasure is a physical state, right?
Right.
So my reading of this is rapture means basically mental comfort, but something more than comfort. Mental, like very positive mental feelings. Like you feel mentally good. And then pleasure, you feel physically good. Fair enough?
Mm-hmm.
Born of seclusion. So this is, again, this is a passage that a lot of teachers and just practitioners in general will, in my opinion, misinterpret. They're looking for this crazy, like, the rapture, for example, like when you win the lottery, right? Maybe not you, but you can imagine when people win the lottery, they feel like intense mental joy and mental pleasure, mental like, excitement. Winning the lottery isn't a physical pleasure, although it can definitely create like pleasant physical, like the mental state can create physical pleasure also. Likewise, pleasure, right? So when you get a really nice massage, right, or you listen to some really nice music and like your ears feel really nice.
Mm-hmm.
So when people read this, they think, oh, so first jhana must mean this like combination of winning the lottery and getting the most amazing massage ever, this explosion of pleasure. But I severely disagree. This is rapture and pleasure. So again, let me put it in more approachable terms. Mental comfort and physical comfort born of seclusion. What kind of mental and physical comfort comes from seclusion? given all these preparatories, imagine all these preparations you did. You went somewhere secluded, you identified hindrances, and with all this preparation and seclusion, you gained physical and mental comfort. I'm saying it's not going to be this huge explosion. It's like a subtle,
Right.
very enjoyable, but not something that you would start craving because it's not this crazy,
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming thing. And so I don't like these translations actually. I don't know the Pali word that's being translated here, but I can't imagine that the Buddha is referring to this like explosion of um, of physical mental pleasure. Because in other sutras, the Buddha refers to the pleasure gained from meditation as being something that won't increase craving, which means it's like a subtle, um,
Just
how
like
to put it?
content.
What's that?
Like content?
Yeah, like
Or
yeah, you could even say that. Extreme physical mental contentment, which isn't going to necessarily feel like, an orgasm.
mm-hmm.
Um, okay, so mental and physical contentment born of seclusion, which feels great, by the way. So once you can feel this, then meditation starts becoming enjoyable. Still not something you would crave or like necessarily start obsessing over, but when you finally do convince yourself to sit down, it'll be something that you're happy you did once you start. I actually compare it to, in my mind, like on a warm day, if a cold breeze rolls by, right? You're not walking through the warm day thinking, I really want a cold breeze. Where's my cold breeze? I can't wait for a cold breeze. But if it comes, you're just like, oh, this is fantastic. And it goes, you go on with your day, right? You don't spend your day obsessing, oh, I wish I could get that cold breeze back, right? Whereas if you like ate a really nice piece of cake, you might start obsessing over that and thinking, oh, I want more cake later.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, I'll repeat, physical mental comfort born of seclusion, and then he says, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. Here is the rub. So again, this is still a step-by-step training, right? So in this training, what you're doing is um, like developing this rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, and you're developing this directed thought and evaluation. So the thought has to come directed and thought and evaluation towards what, right? Um, Lots of different teachers have different interpretations of this, also the second component of the first jhana. But I'm going to say if we read into the second jhana, we'll get a hint into what this is. Okay, here we go. With the stilling of directed thoughts and evaluations, he enters and remains in the second jhana. Rapture and pleasure born of concentration, unification awareness, free from directed thought and evaluation. Internal assurance. So here's the hint. In the first jhana, you train yourself with directed thought and evaluation, right? At some point after you train yourself in this first jhana in enough time, you should expect to reach a stage where you're stilling your directed thoughts and you gain internal assurance. That means that these directed thoughts and evaluations should be directed thoughts and evaluations that lead to the stilling of directed thoughts and evaluations and internal assurance. So what does that mean? So there's lots of ways, and this is, I think, why he didn't explain this further, because there's many suttas where this is like, kind of practiced in real time, and it's never like a one size fits all thing. So, for example, suppose you're sitting and meditating, and you have this physical mental pleasure, and then some thought arises, um, that let's say a thought of mm, I don't know, of greed, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of like, let's say a thought, like for example, let's just a thought comes like, I want to earn more money for some reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
So most people would think of this thought and start kind of fantasizing, oh, how am I going to earn money? What am I going to do with my money once I earn it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once I earn it, how can I grow it further, right? What can I do to prevent losing it, et cetera, et cetera. These kinds of thoughts that have no end, right? There's no end to it.
Right.
Oh, 1 second. Got a notification, sorry. Okay, so those are the kinds of thoughts that will not lead to internal assurance and will not lead to the stilling of directed thoughts and evaluations, right? Because they are directly thinking and evaluating when they do that. When they think, oh, I'm going to invest my money here, I'm going to work this job for this many hours so I can earn this much, and then I'm going to buy a house. One sec. Can I silence my notifications? Anyway, sorry if you hear notifications going off. Anyway, so what kind of thoughts do lead to the stealing of directed thoughts and evaluations and internal assurance? Again, no one size fits all. But perhaps, let's say you think thoughts of like, oh, I want to earn more money. Maybe the thought of, contemplating death, for example, will help you realize that any money you earn will not be kept with you. So it's, pretty futile to obsess over it. And maybe for that person, having that kind of directed evaluation and thought regarding his desire to earn money will help him let go of that money. It will kind of disenchant him from the idea of earning money, right? And he'll say, oh, my whole life I've thought about earning money, but because I did all this preparation work and I sat down and I felt the rapture and pleasure of my seclusion, now I'm evaluating this thought of earning money. I realize it's not worth it. So, screw it. I'm done. No more money. And so right then and there, that thought has been stilled, right? And he's gained internal assurance regarding wanting to earn more money. He's decided he doesn't want to earn any more money, and he's not going to, in this hypothetical, he'll never want to earn more money again because he's truly gained that,
Right.
internal assurance. Of course, it's never that simple. I'm giving you an example. But that's like a broad solution, right? So that's like death contemplation can apply to all sorts of things, right? But maybe his desire to earn more money is something more, specific. For example, like perhaps, when he was growing up, his father like abused him and put this like idea into him that if he doesn't earn money, he's worthless, right? And coupled with other abuse, perhaps he started developing this complex where I must earn money to, become a worthy individual. And so maybe again, with all his prep work, he sits down and that's where he evaluates himself, right? And at the end of it, he realizes, oh, this desire to earn money, it's not mine. It's something that it's trauma that I picked up from my father. So I don't need it anymore. It's not mine and I have no use for it, right? It's not that I want to earn money. It's that my father wanted me to earn money. My whole life I've just been, convinced myself that it's me who wants to earn money, but it's not. So I give it up. So then and there again, that thought and evaluation is stilled, and he gains internal assurance. But it's not just one thought that arises; it's many. So this is a lot. First jhana might take days, weeks, months, years, a whole lifetime to fully work through, because depending on your karma and what kinds of issues exist in your mind, it might take a long time to practice this directed thought and evaluation to the point where you gain internal assurance, and then the thoughts and evaluations are stilled. But to summarize, basically these directed thoughts and evaluations are directed thoughts and evaluations that lead to the end of thoughts and evaluations. Not because you've like zombified yourself or anything, but because there's nothing worth thinking about anymore. You've resolved all your internal conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
And to gain more insight into how to do this properly, you have to read suttas, you have to, consult with your noble friends and everything else. The Buddha has in suttas compared his practice to like being an acrobat. Like you're dodging and weaving and manipulating and trying to work your way into achieving internal assurance, right? So this process of directed thought and evaluation it's not a one size fits all. It's not something that I can explain in 5 minutes. It's like acrobatics, right? So one thought comes at you, and then maybe just contemplating the 3 marks of existence helps. The 3 marks being that all things are not in control, all things are not permanent, and all things are not satisfying, right? Maybe that will help put that thought to rest. Maybe something else, right? So that's one of the reasons why there's so many suttas and so many like angles to look at life that the Buddha offers. Because again, everyone will resonate with different, arguments and evaluations, right? And each issue that you carry in your mind also has different causes. So one evaluation will not apply to another. Like, that might work for one thought, might not work for another because the causes are different. Like I said, one might be from the abuse of your parents, one might be from your misunderstanding of life and death, one might be from your misunderstanding regarding like the 3 marks of existence. Who knows? And furthermore, it's not that you'll sit down, think about death one time, and that thought will just vanish. This is a training. So it might take a long time for you to finally accept the fact that, for example, wealth is not worth obsessing over, right?
Mm-hmm.
So still a training. Notice at no point in this sutta has the Buddha said, okay, training is over, now wait for jhana to come, right?
Mhm.
It's still step training. So like the Tathagata trains him farther. I can keep like inserting that. He trains him farther, seek a dwelling. He trains him farther, abandon the five hindrances. He trains him farther, practice the first jhana. He trains him farther, practice the second jhana. Okay, so I can continue. So yeah, second jhana is you're basically sitting without needing to directly think and evaluate anything. So I'm going to argue also that there's thoughts still arise in the second jhana. It's just that they're not, you're not like engaging with them, you see?
Mhm.
Like there's no thought like, oh, how am I going to earn money? Let's figure this out, right?
Mhm.
But some random nonsense can still come and go, but it's not, it's just your mind like, bouncing around on its own. Okay, so third jhana, with the fading of rapture, he remains equanimous, mindful, and alert, and senses pleasure with the body. So this is also why, sorry, yeah, this is good that I kept going. This is why I think rapture is a mental state, right? Equanimous, mindful, and alert, these are all mental qualities. And
Mhm.
senses pleasure with the body. So that's why I say rapture is like the mental comfort and, enjoyment. So third jhana, the Buddha says, again, training, right? Not something you immediately expect yourself to do right away. But after developing second jhana for a while, he says you're able to let go of this mental comfort and just in your mind be equanimous, mindful, and alert. And then still, pleasure in the body exists. He enters and remains in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare equanimous, mindful, he has a pleasant abiding. So third jhana, you're basically developing your equanimity, mindfulness, and alertness, right?
Mhm.
Having already stilled your thoughts and evaluations, still your body, you're in this state, you're sensing pleasure with the body. So that's kind of like what you're doing, you know. Again, each of these trainings is like a conscious action. So the conscious action here is to sense pleasure in the body, basically, while remaining mindful, alert. Okay. Fourth jhana. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, as with the earlier disappearance of elation and distress, he enters and remains in the fourth jhana. Purity of equanimity and mindfulness, neither pleasure nor pain. So after training in this stage for some time, right, having abandoned thoughts, having abandoned mental, elation, and only, you know, working with physical comfort and pleasure. After training this for long enough, you'll be able to abandon that physical, those physical, pleasure and pain, right? So it's like a mm, two sides of the same coin, right? So basically, in the fourth jhana, you're equanimous not only in mind but also in body. Basically, it's a it's a pretty advanced state, pretty hard to put into words, um, something to be experienced, right?
Mhm.
But a pretty impressive state, right? You have to imagine, like a very high degree of, I guess, like it's almost like a transcendent. Because most people spend their day in thinking and evaluating, in like living in the ups and downs of their mind and body, right? And so in the fourth
Mhm.
jhana, it's like the complete reverse of that. And so he goes on. This is my instruction, Brahmin, to those monks in training who have not attained the heart's goal but remain intent on unsurpassed safety from bondage. This is my instruction to the monks in training, right? Again, this is all training. I keep hammering this home, and to you, it probably seems obvious at this point. But you'll read article after article talking about jhana like some kind of, fancy mental state that comes after thousands of hours of meditation. But if you never train, um, like intently, with intention, these steps that he's describing, there's going to be no first jhana. People might delude themselves into thinking they're doing something they think is first jhana, but in fact, no. So going back to first jhana really quickly, um, it's it's hard. It's not easy to practice first jhana, but it's not like unattainable either. It's not something that's completely out of the realm of possibility, right? All these trainings that you saw before the first jhana, they're not easy, but they're doable, right?
Mhm.
So you go to a retreat center, all these things will basically be done for you. Um, Like in a retreat center, you're basically ready to start examining these 5 hindrances, which again, with good
Mm-hmm.
karma, I'm guessing you barely have these, honestly. Maybe you do, I don't know. So yeah, I would say like with good karma, if you go to a retreat, you can start practicing jhana in like a week, maybe 2, maybe even sooner,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe after a few retreats you can do it. Whatever. Okay, so he says, but for those monks, sorry, let's see. Right, so okay, this is my instruction, Brahmin, to those monks in training. I'm not attaining the heart's goal, but remain intent on the unsurpassed safety from bondage. But for those monks who are arahants, whose effluents have ended, or are ended, who have reached fulfillment, done the task, laid down the burden, attained the true goal, laid to waste the fetter of becoming, and who are released through right gnosis, these qualities lead to both a pleasant abiding in the here and now and to mindfulness and alertness. When this was said, Ganaka Moggallana, the Brahmin, said to the Blessed One, when Master Gautama's disciples are thus exhorted and instructed by him, do they all attain unbinding, the absolute conclusion, or do some of them not? Okay, so the sutta actually has multiple topics. He goes on and the Buddha basically explains that even though the Buddha is extremely powerful, all he can do is explain the steps. And
Mm-hmm.
it's up to the individual. So some individuals will, never move past virtuosity, but some individuals will, practice seriously and be able to achieve the final goal. So it depends on the individual. It has nothing to do with how powerful the Buddha is. You can read this for yourself if you want. It's interesting, but it's not related to
Mm-hmm.
jhana directly
All
anyway.
right. Mm-hmm.
So do you have any questions?
Mm, well, like when I meditate, I
Oh, one sec.
only
Sorry,
sit
sorry.
down. Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Well, like when I first meditate, I notice like my thoughts running around, but then after a while, it like quiets down, and then it just becomes like really peaceful. Like the thoughts just disappear, but then the thoughts come around again, and then I start to like, oh, just see it like pass by, and it like disappears again. So I guess it's just part of the process, right? Like,
Do you engage with those thoughts?
mm, I think initially when I sit down, like I think because I just sat down, I I I tend to follow them around, but when I calm down after a while, I try not to like I try just to like see them as like thoughts just flying by.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's kind of trying to not to criticize you or anything. It's not a bad thing to do actually. So
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing is very effective for the sake of breath meditation. Let me mention something else. When it comes to what the Buddha outlined here, this is not the entire Eightfold Path, right? The question he got
Mm-hmm.
asked by the Brahmin was, "Is there a step-by-step training?" And the Buddha said, "Yes. Here's my example." And he gave like the best example he could think of.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't the whole path. So when we practice breath meditation, right? We're developing lots of different things on this, in this like preparation section. You know,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, okay, metta, we're addressing ill will and anger, right? Um, we're developing mindfulness with breath meditation. Where's that section? You saw it earlier though, right here, right? So breath meditation really helps with this section. So you'll see a lot of different practices and just trainings that we do fits in like from the Eightfold Path. A lot of things fit into this like training that he's describing.
Mm-hmm.
But there's more than just this. The Eightfold Path is bigger than just what he's outlining here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying for the sake of breath meditation, what you're describing is not bad. But if you want to start, delving into jhana, like the article you shared, um, so instead of trying to like let go of those thoughts, because you let go of those thoughts, but then later when you sit down again, they come back, right? So they're not resolved, right? They're still coming.
Or should I like reason like where these thoughts are coming from
Right,
and like
exactly.
okay, yeah. I
Um,
try to do that too.
yeah. Oh, so yeah, a lot of people, especially with good karma, will do this naturally. And then they'll get told by teachers not to do it, right? So in
Okay.
fact, they might be like inadvertently kind of tiptoeing with first jhana, but then get told not to do it. So that's a shame.
Okay, so it's good to reason out those thoughts too at the same time.
If you're doing it effectively, yeah.
Okay.
If you're if you're not making progress, then you can just let them go and say, "I'll deal with this later," kind of thing, or
Oh,
I'll re-investigate this at another time.
mm-hmm.
Um, so, like I said, there's no one size fits all on what's going to resolve your thoughts, but
Right.
the maybe the most generically applicable approach is to regard your thoughts according to the Four Noble Truths, right? Because when you're thinking about something, it's because it's important. It's because it's something that's on your mind, bothering you, whatever, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
some level of dukkha there, of
Right.
discontentment.
Mm-hmm.
So first noble truth is understanding that discontentment very precisely, right? So the first thing, so if you don't know what to do with your thoughts, it's never wrong to just examine them, like how they're making you feel, right? What the emotions are that are associated with them, like are these thoughts anger? Are these thoughts, lust, or you know,
Mm-hmm.
longing for some pleasure, whatever. Understand that thought very well, right? And then the second noble truth is the cause of them, right? So then try to figure out what's causing these thoughts, right? On a very deep level. So, like, again, the example of the person who wants money, a very shallow answer to why those thoughts are coming would be, oh, I just want money. I'm thinking about
Mm-hmm.
money because I want money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't have money, so that's my problem. I don't have money. That's a very shallow answer. But if he digs deeper, he might realize, oh, I'm thinking these because my father abused me, for example, I gave you from the previous example. So that's more deep, accurate answer to why those thoughts are coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just those thoughts are coming, the discomfort is coming, right?
Right.
The discomfort that those thoughts are
Or
trying to address. What were you saying?
or we could think of like money is not permanent, right? So I
There's
should
lots of
be like
there's lots of approaches, right? So there's
right.
absolutely no one size fits all. There's suttas
Okay.
where a monk is having some kind of block, and the Buddha. This happens all the time, so I'm not going to be specific, but they're out there. So the monk is blocked somehow, and the Buddha comes and gives him a very personal solution. So the classic one is there's a monk who in a past, like the Buddha perceived that in a past life he was a goldsmith, and this monk was just not grasping the concept of impermanence. So the Buddha appears to him and
Oh yeah.
presents. You've heard this one?
Mhm. Yeah, I heard it somewhere.
Yeah, I'll finish the story since I'm recording a video actually in case. Oh, do I have your
Oh
permission to post the video? Do you mind?
oh yeah, sure.
So he creates a lotus, a golden lotus, and the man who was a goldsmith, the monk who was a goldsmith in his past life, is very drawn to it, and to him it's like the embodiment of perfection. And then the Buddha takes this lotus and brings it through like the full cycle of decay. And so then that monk finally understood what it means for things to be impermanent.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a very personalized. It's not that every single person who sees a golden lotus and then watches it decay will understand, right? It's a very personal thing to him. So likewise, whatever solution to your thoughts exists is going to be utterly personal, right? Because your karma is completely unique to you. There's no one else with the same karma as you, which means there's no one else who will need to, you know, think and evaluate the exact things that you need to in order to achieve second jhana. And when I say achieve, I mean achieve the ability to practice because it's still a training. So it's like
Right.
I tell people like you can achieve the ability to climb a mountain, but it doesn't mean you're climbing the mountain. You still have to go and do the thing, right?
Mm.
So you might achieve the ability to practice first jhana, but you know the training is to actually practice it, not just to have the ability to practice it.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you think so. And it blows my mind that there's no teachers who are teaching what I'm saying. To me, it's so obvious, and not just from reading the sutta, which I think I read in a very straightforward way, but just my own experience. I practice according to these instructions. I've spent weeks and months at doing retreats basically working on this, and I verified it for myself. If you do a retreat, I'm telling you, for 2 weeks or something, you'll see for yourself that this, in fact, is exactly as advertised.
Mm.
Because there is a goal of no longer needing to think, basically. Not that thoughts don't exist, but no longer needing to think. You see what I'm saying? And this exists in lots of different spiritual practices, this notion of no longer needing to think. But every spiritual practice that I've encountered achieves that through kind of like brute force, right? Kind of like beating down the mind every time it starts thinking something, you know? Or like distracting it every time it starts thinking something. But this approach is so natural, right? So intuitive. You know, you're not beating the mind down. You're basically working with the mind. I think you were at the group meditation when I said, it's like being, oh no, you weren't there actually. So I was telling Sam, I said, when it comes to this training, the whole Eightfold Path, not just jhana, but jhana also, the best way to approach it is like you're treating yourself like a good parent would treat a child, right? A good parent would not, berate the child for making a mistake or, you know, isolate the child or whatever, right? A good parent would explain to the child why'd you make this mistake? How can we address it? How are you feeling, etc. All these very like compassionate, patient things. Just like that, if you take that same approach to the thoughts that arise in your mind, you'll actually be able to, find conclusion in them. So the people who practice trainings where they try to like force themselves to stop thinking, it never sticks. It maybe they can stop thinking for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, a minute, an hour, but at no point will they ever feel truly, as the Buddha says, internally assured. Where they'll always be struggling with this like desire, this like impulse to think about things.
Mm.
But if you practice like I described, you'll reach a stage where not that you have to force yourself to stop thinking, but there's just nothing worth thinking about. It really is. It's internal assurance. You're just like, oh, I'm sitting here with rapture and pleasure, born of seclusion, and I don't have problems, basically. That's what it feels like. I have no problems.
Mhm.
Nothing worth thinking about.
Mhm.
Right?
But
I'm
then
not a
what do you
zombie. I'm
mean?
still very conscious, but
Mhm.
I'm internally assured. There's nothing going wrong. It's very nice. Very, very comfortable. But it has to be trained. It's not easy to, get there. If you
Right.
don't train very intently on it, you won't get there. And so that's why all these teachers saying that jhana is just a mental state that you gain from thousands of hours of meditation, they've never touched jhana, honestly.
Oh.
What they have touched is very pleasant feelings from meditation, which they've confused for jhana.
Oh.
Um,
Okay.
those exist too, right? So there's plenty of spiritual practices that aim to basically, there's people who gain intoxication from like drugs, right? Or,
Yeah.
sense pleasures, right? And there's other people who gain intoxication from meditative practices. That exists too. So I would argue that most people who think jhana is a mental state that's achieved through lots of meditation, they are not maybe not on purpose, but inadvertently also doing that same, getting intoxicated from meditation.
Mhm.
But the goal is not intoxication because intoxication, again, is not permanent, not your control, and not completely satisfying, right?
Right.
So so some people will get this intoxication, they'll think it's jhana, they'll call it jhana, their teachers will call it jhana, and then a week later they'll say, oh, I can't do it anymore, what happened? It went away. And then they'll spend their whole life chasing this intoxication again, to no avail, right?
Mhm.
But the Buddhist training is not about intoxication. It's about achieving a certain result through conscious action and practice and training. And that result is, complete comfort, complete peace, complete happiness. So it's like the feeling, I don't want anything anymore. I'm good permanently, right? Not only do I not want anything now, I'm never going to want anything again because I'm just that I'm so satisfied that my satisfaction is unshakable, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and you're not going to get that by just, getting blissed out for meditation.
Right.
So that bliss for meditation can be a useful tool to, steer you away from more, unwholesome things. And the Buddha does actually explain that. I, don't, I heard this from a monk. I don't know if it's in a sutta. It probably is though, but it makes sense that at some point, the solution to some of the negativities we carry, like lust, for example, it's not you can't think your way out of it. But what you can do is replace that with an even bigger pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that that's where like third and fourth jhana come in. So if you become very highly trained to the point where you can just basically practice fourth jhana whenever you want, right? Every time you're feeling lustful, you can just do fourth jhana. Every time you're feeling you need some cake or something, whatever, fourth jhana, right? And that's comfort that will surpass any kind of lustful activities or pleasures of any ear or eye or anything like that, right?
Oh, so like you can even apply those in real life while like not just meditating. Just
I would imagine so. I mean, if your training is very high
mm,
level, why not, right?
right.
So point being that when you gain this internal assurance, this is not liberation, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is just resolving the problems in your mind. Like, but you're still going to have cravings.
Yeah.
This is not like ending your cravings. This is simply ending the things that you need to think about or ending,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's different. You'll still have cravings. And those cravings will be addressed further on with the later jhanas by basically, like I said, replacement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this isn't in the suttas. It's kind of I guess, my opinion, my view. So cravings are a static thing, right? Cravings are not permanent, right? They grow and
Mm,
evolve and change.
right.
So I say if you leave cravings unfed, they'll go away, just like anything else, right?
Yeah.
And so, but it gives example like a fire that gets put out, right, or a fire that loses its fuel, that runs its course. So, in my mind, these later jhanas are basically allowing you to let the fire burn out um, without feeding the fire of craving. Meaning, like every time you want some cake, right, and you start thinking about the cake and planning on how you're going to get the cake and thinking about how it's going to taste, right, you're feeding the
Mm,
craving. I mean, you shouldn't necessarily feel guilty about that because you know the guilt won't help you get rid of the craving. But by
mm,
doing this training, you can replace that tendency with something far more wholesome, right?
right.
So instead of feeding the craving when it arises, thanks to your highly developed ability to practice fourth jhana, right? Um,
Oh.
you can immediately stop feeding that craving then and there because you're so well trained, right? In the ideal.
Oh, so basically if you reach like the fourth stage, you're just always in that mind state where
No, not always.
oh well
If you choose to enter it, again, it's a very intentional thing, right?
oh okay.
But I would say if you can practice fourth jhana regularly, you can just live at a meditation center or become a monk or something or a nun,
Oh.
and you'll become liberated pretty quick, I imagine. Depending on the degree to which you have cravings depends on your karma, right? So if you have a lot of cravings, it might take a long time to become liberated. If you have few cravings, it might be quick. But either way, once you're once you've attained this, it's just a matter of time, basically, in my mind.
Hmm.
Also, furthermore, the Buddha describes four stages of liberation. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you can reach fourth jhana like consistently, I would say you're at least a stream enterer, if not, a once returner. Like this is a pretty
Mm,
high degree of training.
I
So
see.
you're you're really on the right track if you're able to do fourth jhana regularly.
Mm,
So I'm saying that's how it fits in with the final goal.
mm,
And you know the,
yeah.
this is that's what the Buddha says right here. He says, if they're intent on the heart's goal, on the surpassed safety from bondage, this is their training.
Hmm. Yeah, so
And then the
everything's
Buddha
actually
says,
like
yeah, so the Buddha says further, even if you're an arahant, this is still a useful training for the sake of pleasant abiding in the here and now and to mindfulness and awareness. Meaning that this jhana practice, it does serve the goal of gaining unsurpassed safety from bondage. But even once you've become liberated, it's still a useful tool to keep the mind and body sharp, basically. Because even a liberated person might still have things they want to do before they die, right?
mm,
So that's the Buddha saying, basically. He's saying this training is good for the, like for the mundane purpose of just remaining, you know, having a pleasant abiding and remaining mindful and alert, and for the more like, serious quote unquote purpose of becoming liberated, gaining the unsurpassed safety from bondage.
mm,
Anyway, make sense?
yeah, yeah.
So that's my,
Everything actually
what's
ties
that?
in together.
Yeah,
Oh,
no, I heard you. So that's my reading of jhana, not only from reading the suttas, but also from my own experience. And now you can see why I have severe disagreements with basically every teacher. I mean, find me a teacher who understands this the way I do, and I'll go. I'll take them very
mm.
seriously. But I have not found it.
Yeah, I feel like that article, yeah, they were focusing more on the meditative states or yeah, like
Right.
yeah.
Which are a useful tool. The Buddha does not deny that they're useful, but they're
Yeah.
not the goal. And
Yeah,
simply
so
accessing them over and over again is not going to necessarily bring you to the goal.
mhm,
The Buddha describes his path like, I'm sure you've heard this, like you're on one shore, and that shore is a undesirable shore, right? Uncomfortable shore. Perhaps, there's glass on the beach, the waves crash hard, right?
mhm,
And so you build a raft, and then you take that raft across the shore. So you're building the raft out of the materials you find on the shore, right?
mhm,
So basically, to generalize, you're working with what you have, and you're making the best of it. You're taking what you have and you're making it something useful, something worthwhile. And you take that raft across to the other shore. Once you reach the other shore, you let go of the raft. You don't need it anymore. So we're working with what we have. We're working with our desire for comfort and pleasure, right? So that's why first jhana, rapture and pleasure born in seclusion, right? If there was no physical mental comfort, we would struggle as beings, human or not, to, to be willing to do this, right?
mhm,
Accompanied by directed thought and evaluation, meaning as beings, we have these thoughts and ability to think and evaluate, right? So instead of like pushing it down and suppressing it, we're going to put it to use, you see? And then now we gain internal assurance. Us beings, we really enjoy internal assurance. This is something that's, allows us to gain a lot of clarity, right? So we're using what we have to, this is the raft, basically, in a sense. This is not the whole raft, obviously. The Eightfold Path is bigger than this, but. So, also, I want to say one last thing. Um, this is exactly how, this is the biggest way, I mean, not the only way, but the biggest way that right concentration. So jhana is right concentration, right evaluation, right discernment, right? That's the fold of right concentration. This is how right concentration leads into right view. This right here, directed thought and evaluation. When you're directly thinking and evaluating, what are you doing? You're developing right view, right? Right view regarding your own, discomforts, insecurities, whatever the case, right? And I'll say this even further. You can actually do this direct thought and evaluation for things that are not necessarily for the purpose of internal assurance, actually. Because it might still be useful in an indirect way. For example, you can directly think and evaluate like things related to your career with the idea that if your career is very resolved, you'll have more, let's say, free time to go to retreats and practice properly, for example. So it's not directly leading into internal assurance, but indirectly, yeah. It's like making your life more solid and therefore allowing you to progress better. It's fine. So don't think that this is a And again, the Buddha says there's like a mundane use for this training, right? So even if you're an arahant, this training is still useful. So that's what I'm saying. So you can still apply this for mundane purposes. Totally fine. I wouldn't get stuck in doing that all the time, obviously, but if you feel it's necessary, it's totally fine. And that's why I think it's fantastic the Buddha didn't give like a specific topic to think and evaluate on, right?
Hmm.
Like so you can think and evaluate just like, in terms of like taking stock of, am I generous enough, for example, or like, the wholesome qualities you have. Like I'm saying like regarding anything on the Eightfold Path, or not, again, anything, your career, you know, what kind of birthday gift to give to your friend. Like, okay, that's a super mundane example, but think about it. If you have, noble friends with whom you have strong relationships with, right? They will help, like that strong relationship will help you progress in the path, right? So maybe it is worthwhile to take some time and think of a really nice birthday gift, even while you're practicing first, like in first jhana, you're thinking about what kind of birthday gift to give. Maybe that's useful.
Hmm.
So this becomes, like I said, the Buddha says this is like a tool, even for those who are liberated. This is just a very useful tool. So I would definitely consider that side of it too. So there's two sides, right? There's the side where you're using it for the sake of, unsurpassed safety from bondage, but also from the side where you're just using it, as, for practical purposes.
Hmm.
The thing about the Buddha's path is it's very practical and very like down to earth, not esoteric at all. So you don't need to meditate for thousands of hours or be some very impressive, person, right? You can work it very much into your life in every sense. You can build your whole life around this, teaching and training, and at no point will your life feel like it's disconnected from society, from the world, from reality.
Hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why the Buddha made so many rules for his monks that forced them to basically be connected to society, right?
Right.
Because and there's many sutras where the Buddha repeats like this: there is no esoteric teaching in my teachings, right? There's nothing like special secret teaching that I give only to my monks or only to this special group of people. Nothing like that.
Hmm.
It's all very down to earth. So there you go. So in one sense, this training he's describing is pretty high level, but on another sense, it's also very human, very practical, you know,
Yeah.
very accessible given you do the right thing. So like I commonly think of like climbing a mountain, right? Not that everyone can climb a mountain, but if you really want to climb a mountain, you can train yourself to do it, right? Assuming you have your health and everything.
Yeah.
But that's another thing. This training doesn't require you to be necessarily very physically or even mentally healthy, right?
Hmm.
So it is. I would say this is more accessible than climbing a mountain, but also much more difficult. I would put it that way. Like, more people can do this than climb a mountain in theory, but practically speaking, this is far more difficult.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can see for yourself, article after article, teacher after teacher, understanding this incorrectly. So clearly, it's not easy, right? Anyway, any more questions?
No, no, that was very, very helpful. Thank you so
Good.
much.
I'm glad you thought so. And again, this is you can see why I really praise going on retreats and everything, because you could do this meditating an hour or 30 minutes a day, but it'll just be very slow going. Like the
Hmm.
amount of because you can make like a little meditation room for yourself, but it won't compare to like the seclusion of a meditation center, right?
Yeah.
You can try to stay mindful through the day, but you're so busy, you have so many, relationships and responsibilities. It'll be far more difficult to stay mindful in your day to day than at a meditation center or a monastery.
Yeah.
Um, right. So yeah, seclusion difficult, mindfulness difficult. Being moderation in eating is difficult, right? Being guarded in your sense faculties is difficult in the lay life. being virtuous, not overly difficult, but definitely easier at a monastery or a meditation center. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, being taking care of your sleep properly, also, being devoted to wakefulness, more difficult in lay life. Everything. Five hindrances, easier at a retreat center. So yeah, if you want to get serious about this, I definitely would take a week at least and just see how far you can get with this. I mean, with you, May, honestly, I bet you could definitely start dabbling in this first jhana business um, after a week at a retreat center.
Oh, yeah. I've been wanting to go, but yeah, sometime.
Yeah, sometime. Figure it out. In the meantime, 30 minutes a day, an hour a day, it'll be fine.
Mhm. Do you go regularly?
I've been trying to resolve my commitments as a layperson, right? I want to grow this community. I have to earn money to pay some debts, etc. So
Mhm.
I went many months ago. But since I began, practicing the Buddhist teachings, I've gone a lot. Many week-long retreats. And like I said, when I was trying to become a monk, I was at a monastery for 3 months. And it was actually there where I was doing lots of reading and contemplating while I was there, suttas, books of different, teachers and everything. And that's where I finally put the pieces together regarding jhana.
Mhm.
Um, what happened during those 3 months is I actually started practicing first jhana. Um, uh, what's the word? By chance. Because remember I said like you should treat yourself like a good parent would treat their child. I realized that at the monastery, just by happen chance. And so when I would sit down, and because I was there for so long and meditating so seriously, while I was there, but also previously, I had a really good practice. I still do, but so I was at the monastery. I was just thinking, oh, I want to think about all these things, but I've read all these things saying don't think, ignore the thoughts. But you know what? I'm just gonna let myself, investigate this further. It was a very like
Mhm.
compassionate, patient, response to those things. And then only later, maybe even like a week after I started doing that, did I take a really close look at this sutta, and I realized, oh, that's what I've been doing. And so I gained a lot of assurance that what I'm doing is actually in line with what the Buddha taught. So I went further while I was there. So I think while I was there for those 3 months, 2 of them I spent exploring this pretty intently.
Mhm.
So there's the answer to your question. And I'll go again soon. Once some of my debts get paid off, and I've made good progress on that front. So I think maybe in a few months I'll start going regularly again. Furthermore, another issue I have is that I have not found a place that I felt like is just really on the dot in terms of, because again, there's no monastery where the teacher is teaching this properly, right? So you go to a monastery, and maybe 90% of what they teach is good, but then the 10% that is not accurate, you're just gonna feel like this isn't really my place, right? Or like there's no monastery where you can go discuss first jhana and have people understand what you're saying, right?
Mhm.
There's another common view that jhana is something not to be discussed. It's like a taboo, right? If you can practice first jhana, or not practice, right? Because they don't think it's a practice. If you have attained first jhana, as they say, you should never say. It's very secret. It's very taboo to say anything. The Buddha made a rule where the monks could not tell lay people about their attainments. And if they did, that they got the minor punishment, like the lowest level of punishment. It's an infraction, but it's not a big one. The big infraction is if they lie about it. But if a monk accurately tells a layperson, "Oh, I can practice third jhana," that monk then has to go and confess, basically, and say, "I won't do it again.
Mhm.
I'm sorry." Apologize and confess, basically. It's not a huge punishment. He doesn't get like put on probation. He doesn't get removed from the order. And there's no rule against lay people telling anyone. Lay people can tell. The only reason monks aren't supposed to tell lay people about it is because it creates, you know, it can create some kind of like, I guess, idolization of like individuals, I guess.
Mhm. Mhm.
But monks can tell other monks, lay people can tell other lay people, and lay people can tell monks. There's no prohibition against that. What people cannot do is lie, like knowingly lie. Like
Yeah.
I know I can't practice fourth jhana, but I'm going to tell people I can because I want to get fame and whatever. That if you're a monk and you do that, you get removed immediately.
I see.
And that's why a lot of people misunderstand and think, oh, it's a taboo subject. You should never talk about it because the punishment is that you'll get removed from me. No, only if you lie, then you get removed. So my point is, me going to monasteries honestly is an uncomfortable experience in some regard because everyone there, everyone like almost everyone there goes to monasteries is going because the teacher there they think is the correct teacher, the one teaching the correct teachings, right? So if I say something that goes against what the teacher says, I'll get looked at like some kind of you know, not freak, but like I look like somebody who has wrong view. They'll think, right? Even though I know I have right view, and actually they are the ones with wrong view. But so I mean, I never brought this up to you, but I actually, one of my goals in my life is to build my own meditation center, like
Oh yeah,
a
be
place where
cool.
everyone, yeah, and it's not a place where everyone has to follow my teachings or anything, but a place where, you know, everyone is in a good environment to practice, right, and being supported by
Yeah.
those around them, as opposed to like most monasteries and retreat centers you go to, that individual teacher who built the center or who built the organization, you kind of have to go with their script, right? And everyone there is going with that script. And so it does feel a little bit like there's a lack of connection. That's all.
Hmm.
But I'll still, I mean, I go when I stomach it because even if 10% is not um, congruent, the 90% that is congruent is still very nice. It's nice to be able to, you know, say like, oh, all things aren't permanent, and then everyone else says, oh yeah, that's true, that's right. Whereas if you say that on the subway or something, right, people will just think
Yeah.
you're a nihilist. What are you talking about? You're weird. Go away. God is eternal. What are you talking about? So.
Yeah. That's true.
I still on occasion try to go to new retreat centers and such, hoping to find a place where I can feel very much, you know, I guess maybe not at home, but the closest thing I
Hmm.
found was the one I was 3 months at. Because even though
Right.
Ajahn Jeff, or Thanissaro Bhikkhu as he's called sometimes, even though he also I think doesn't teach completely correctly, and even though he also does during the evening sits give like a talk, which sometimes it's to me it's almost feels like a waste of time. Sorry, my dog's growling. Max, come here.
Oh.
So it's not that it's like upsets me to listen to teachings I think are wrong, but it just feels like a waste of time. Like I'm sitting there, like I still watch my breath. I try to like make good use of the time, but it just it'd be nicer if the teachings were completely accurate. Anyway, but with that said, Ajahn Jeff's monastery is very like flexible, more so than any other center or monastery I've been to. In that like nothing on the schedule there is required. And if you miss everything, basically, nobody's going to. People will check up on you and make sure you're okay, but nobody's going to say, "Oh, why are you even here?" For example.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of flexibility there. So unfortunately, it's a little far away from me, but if I was going to go anywhere, I would probably want to go there. It's
I see.
it's not. I think again, the vision I have for a meditation center, I think, obviously, in my opinion, would be better. Otherwise, I wouldn't be wanting to build it. But with that said, I think his monastery is the best one of our options here in California. Anyway.
Hmm. I'm like wondering how all these like different ideas about jhanas came about. Like maybe is it because like it's easier for people to follow it that way, or I don't know.
What do you mean came about?
Oh, like they're like
Oh, you mean
focusing
the
on like
like the common
aspects.
notion regarding it?
Yeah.
I can answer that question for you. It's
Is it like
because
too hard?
it's
Or
because of when Buddhism enters a country for the first time, it so most religions when they enter a country, the country starts adapting itself. The culture of that country adapts to match the religion, right?
Mhm.
So if a religion says pray twice a day, then the culture starts praying twice a day. If the religion
Oh,
says don't eat this food or that food, then the culture says, okay, we're not eating this food or that food. But Buddhism is the reverse. Buddhism, when it enters a country, not completely like it's not black and white, but there's a lot more of the Buddhism adapting to the country, and to the sensibilities of that country, the cultural, the existing spirituality of that country, right before the Buddhism
mhm.
arrives. So, so there's many factors like that that leads to the result you see now. Every single Western Buddhist, every single teacher who writes in English,
Mhm.
got trained by people from Southeast Asia, by teachers from Southeast Asia. And those teachers are part of a lineage that again had this concept or this like element of, cultural injection into the teachings of the Buddha, right?
Mhm.
And so consider this. Think about a country, right? Just a
Okay.
ambiguous country where teachings come, right? And then people start following those teachings and become very highly developed in them, right? Of those highly developed individuals in those teachings, who is going to be the one that gains the most recognition from the people of that country, right? The most praise, the most donations, etc., right? And therefore also the most followers, the most students, the most disciples, of whom themselves might become impressive in that training. The person who becomes like that will be the one who the culture sees as most valid, most, impressive, right? Not
Mhm.
necessarily who will actually be most impressive and valid, as it were. Um, and so this teacher who gets chosen by the culture as the most impressive, representation of that training, according to that culture's perceptions. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
That teacher will then have to pick a student, right? And the student they pick will be even more so in line with those sensibilities, right?
Right.
And then so on and so forth it goes. And so then you get, you know, Thai Buddhism is very Thai. Tibetan Buddhism is very Tibetan. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm. Mhm.
And none of these Buddhisms are very, you know, Siddhartha Gautama type, you know, teachings, as it were. It has very strong elements of those perhaps, but definitely lots of
Yeah.
cultural injections. And I could even, I don't think it's necessary, but I could list off a whole bunch of, like, I can tell you, oh, the Sri Lankans have this sensibility or this concept that's not accurate. Oh, the Thais have this or that. And everything can be traced back to, like, you know, Thai folk spirituality or Sri Lankan, cultural, sensibilities, etc.
Mhm.
So to answer your question, why is jhana being taught incorrectly? Because the way it's being taught is far more impressive, far more attractive to the cultures of Southeast Asia.
I see.
The suttas where the Buddha predicts his teachings will die after 500 years. And I actually think he was right. Some people think that sutta is like an addition, later addition, but later addition or not, I think it's accurate. I think his teachings are very fragile because of that concept I just outlined, right? It's very easy for incorrect ideas to be injected, and the threshold for like how much wrong view you can have and still
Mhm.
make like achieve the final goal, it's basically zero. You basically can't have any wrong view.
Mhm.
Um, so when these injections happen, they seem innocent. It's like one little thing here or there, but even one little thing here or there will, um, you know, it's like shooting an arrow, right? Even if
Mhm.
you deviate by a millimeter from the bow, the arrow might end up, many feet away. And the more you deviate, the farther the arrow will miss the mark. It's like that.
I feel
So,
like it's just gonna get worse from now, right?
of course, all
Yeah,
things
like
decay. All things decay.
well, I meant like the teachings and the
Yes?
tradition. Yeah.
And the only way they can get better is if a Buddha comes and, straightens them out.
Oh, so another Buddha. Yeah.
hmm but with that said, I think we can make enormous progress and maybe even make the final goal because even though the traditions are flawed, the Dhamma is the Dhamma, right? It's there for you to discover. It's
Mhm.
timeless in a sense.
Mhm.
Like whether you live during the Buddha's time or before the Buddha's time or after the Buddha's time or very far after or to the point where the teachings are very distorted, Dhamma is still a Dhamma. And if you're
Mhm.
clever, if you're hardworking, if you discern well, it's there for you to find. It's not it's not like these traditions that have distorted the teachings themselves are still there undistorted, completely undistorted, right? It's
Mhm.
just your access to them isn't as straight as it was 2,000 years ago, for example.
Mhm.
You have to be a little bit more clever, a little bit more self-sufficient, you could say.
Yeah.
So that's my hopeful message. And even if liberation is quite unattainable due to this fact, gaining lesser developments of liberate, along the path of liberation, stream entry and once returner or non-returner, I think those are definitely more accessible in liberation. And so,
Mhm.
still very amazing results. Results that if you achieved upon your death, you could say, my life was truly special. So there's no need to. There's no,
Mhm.
it might seem like, oh, I wish I was born 2,000 years ago so I could practice this better. But on the other hand, being born now is still extremely lucky compared to being born, let's say, 100 years before the Buddha was, right?
Right.
And in terms of the scale of time, 2,000 years is nothing, right? There will be far more beings born during periods where there's no teachings, right?
Mhm.
Than there are beings born during periods where there are teachings. Furthermore, even if you're being born during the period where the teachings exist, um, your capacity to understand them, or even your access to them, might be limited. And so, I think you and I are extremely lucky. There's no question about it.
Mhm.
So yeah, our work is definitely cut out for us compared to how it was when the Buddha was alive. That is true.
Mhm.
But that's life. We still have an amazing opportunity. That's my point.
So all beings just started from a consciousness, right?
So the Buddha said that so the Buddha could perceive his past lives, and he could perceive an enormous amount of past lives. And even with all the past lives he could perceive, the Buddha said, I cannot perceive a beginning.
Oh.
I could not perceive a first birth. So actually, um, perceiving a first birth is one of the four unknowables. Here, let me
Oh.
find it. Unknowables, but I memorized them, but unanswerable questions. Here we go. The four imponderables. Okay, so the range of the powers of a Buddha. So the capacity of a Buddha, right? The jhana range of somebody who's absorbed in jhana. So I would say the powers of a Buddha, the mind of an arahant, the precise result of karma. Yeah, this is actually very important to understand. Karma is very extremely complicated, and it's never something like that's easy to say like if this then that. Apparently, Gautama Buddha could, but he said I can just barely do this. Like my
Mhm.
ability to understand the precise result of karma is at the edge of my capacity. So I would say if for this to be possible, you have to be a Buddha basically. And then here's the last one: speculation about the origin of the cosmos. Okay, yeah,
Mhm.
or it's basically first birth.
Mhm. Okay.
So yeah, there's some notion. I don't know if this is from the sutras or not, but some notion that the Maitreya Buddha, the next one, actually will be able to do this. Like give
Oh.
a clearly understand whether there is or isn't a first birth. But that's I don't know where I heard that. Honestly, I can't even tell you.
Oh.
That's probably a Mahayana thing, honestly. So yeah, there's the answer to your question. And there might not be a first birth. It might be something that's not. within the realm of, our understanding.
Mm.
And so the thing is, it doesn't matter, basically. That's the real point.
Yeah.
Same thing with karma. It doesn't exactly matter why things happen. It's good to know a sense of how things happen, right? Like if I do lots of bad things, the probability that bad things will happen to me and negativities will develop in my mind will increase, right? But exactly how that plays out is not necessarily worth obsessing over. Like you know that killing somebody is bad and leads to bad results, but Angulimala killed 99 people and still became an arhat in that same lifetime.
Mhm.
So because even though all that bad karma he did from killing people, he had so much good karma. And because, again, karma is not something that's so one to one, easy to understand, he was still able to become liberated after those unfortunate acts he did. So, there you go.
Mhm.
Any more questions?
No, no, I'm good for now.
I know, I dumped a lot on you.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was very helpful.
I'm glad you thought so. Thanks. It
Yeah.
makes me very happy. Yeah, like I said, this is the
And
first sutta in the Discord. You can always just look at it.
yeah, maybe I should start reading these suttas
Yeah, I've listed
regularly.
not all of the ones that are worth reading, but a nice
Mhm.
collection in the Discord. There's some good ones. Yeah, definitely look at those.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that you can definitely really get into at a retreat center or a monastery. Really dive deep into those. I did. I mean, I read so many suttas while I was um, staying for those 3 months.
Oh.
I read so many that at this point I just have like a bunch of important stuff memorized from them, and
Mhm.
I don't really go back to them too often.
Mhm.
And so that's one of the reasons why when I'm like doing our little discussion after the meditation, I don't really bring up suttas very much. Like
Oh.
or like I don't read them out or anything because to me they're just like not completely second nature, but something like that. So, some teachers will reference the suttas a lot, but to me,
Yeah.
because it's like so second nature, I just tell people to, figure out on their own, like read the suttas on your own, basically. I mean, I posted a bunch, so it's not like I'm completely
Mhm.
leaving you high and dry, but
Mhm.
basically I gained what I feel like I needed to gain from the suttas for the most part, like, 90%. So
Mhm.
I don't go to them very much anymore, but on occasion I still do.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh yeah, if you find some nice suttas that you think are worth sharing, please post them. I might add them to the list.
Oh, yeah.
And that would be, I think, yeah, it would be a good inspiration for people to, read those also if you think are useful and a good discussion topic. So please,
Maybe I should delete that article.
right? You see, so after I explained how things are, now you can see how there's so much misleading information, right?
Well, that's why I was sending you first to like
No, that's
confirm
fine, that's
what.
fine. But you see also why when people come to me asking like me to recommend a teacher, I struggle, right?
What?
So lots of people ask me the question, "Oh, do you recommend any teachers or
Oh, okay.
YouTube channels?" You see why I struggle with that answer?
Yeah. Yeah.
My answer is always, I'll recommend myself, otherwise, you know, figure it out. And that's my
Mhm.
unfortunate answer. I can't just tell them like, don't go to any other teacher, or go to other teachers but know they're wrong about this. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's tricky. This current environment is not easy to navigate, I'll tell you.
Mhm.
Lots of competing viewpoints and misunderstandings and all sorts of nonsense. So be careful.
Mhm.
My advice to people is always go back to your experience, to your discernment. Um, if the people really thought, well, the people who go to jhana as like you know, a high, like a high state, like a drug high kind of thing, those people who do that, if they really thought carefully about what's going on with what they're doing, they'd realize there's an emptiness there, right? A kind of like like a desperation. They achieve this state maybe, and then like a week later they can't do it anymore, so they kind of start grasping for it again. It's just a kind of a
Mm.
endless cycle. If they
Mm.
were careful, they'd realize. So that's why I say tell people to rely on their experience and discernment, because those
Mm.
people who are doing that, they are experiencing the impermanence of that high mental state, right? They're
Mm.
just making the classic wrong conclusion of thinking, oh, the solution is to lean even further into it or pursue it even harder, right?
Mm.
Like people who get very high states from drugs, for example, their
Mm.
solution is not to realize, oh, this high state ended, and so I can see that actually these drugs are, you know, lacking, they're unsatisfying. Instead of making that correct conclusion, they'll make the wrong conclusion. Oh, I should take more drugs. That's the solution,
Yeah.
right? The problem is I'm not taking drugs often enough or in high quantities. Likewise, a lot of people who try to get jhana make the same wrong conclusion.
Mm.
But the answer is staring them in the face. That high mental state is impermanent. It's not satisfying completely. It's not completely satisfying, and it's not in their control. It comes on its own. It leaves on its own. If they really realized that, they would abandon it and look somewhere else.
Mm.
So if you rely on your experience and discernment, I think it becomes possible to navigate this whole sphere.